Hello. Just for a few minutes we're going to talk about spinal cord and the anatomical arrangement in a spinal cord. This is going to lead on to talking about spinal nerves and how they are formed. A spinal cord is fundamentally a tube. It's the same arrangement as in the developing neural tube. And this tube, like the neural tube, is divided in half down its midline. The dorsal half, the half to the back, is sensory, whilst the ventral half is motor. And remembering that in the neural tube the neural crest forms towards the dorsal part of the tube, just below the ectoderm. So we should remember that out here is a critical structure called the dorsal root ganglion, and that dorsal root ganglion is a derivative of the neural crest cells, and it has a little bunch of neurons. Well, in fact it can have millions of neurons in it, and those neurons are, because it's on the dorsal half, sensory neurons, and they send arms into the spinal cord, which synapse in the grey matter of the spinal cord, and then they send arms outward as well. And let's just, for the sake of this, draw a second one. Arm into the spinal cord, sensory again, synapse there, and an arm heading out to something in the outer world. On the other side, on the ventral side of the spinal cord, you see something quite different. What you see is the actual cells within the spinal cord, we'll draw two of them here, neurons, in the grey matter, send their projections directly out towards the, directly out to join up with the sensory fibres. There we go, there's one there, and here comes the second one here. So in summary, we have motor neurons towards the ventral and sensory neurons derived from the neural crest towards the dorsal. Where these come out from the spinal cord, their journey from the spinal cord to where they merge, this total distance here is only about 3 or 4 millimetres, and this merger and the dorsal root ganglion sit between the vertebra in the intervertebral foramen. And notice that the area immediately adjacent to the spinal cord here is purely sensory to the dorsal and purely motor towards the ventral. And this area here is called rootlets. And really, it's the only place you can find the beginnings of a spinal nerve that is either purely motor or purely sensory. There is an effect of this arrangement in the spinal cord, and that is the grey matter on the dorsal side is smaller in area than the grey matter on the ventral side. And that leads us to a very poorly drawn but interesting arrangement where we have these large blob areas to the ventral of the grey matter of the spinal cord. And that's really a function that you have the cell bodies of the motor neurons in that area. So this is the beginnings of the story of a spinal cord. What I thought we might do now is talk about what happens over at this end here. So if I redraw these 4 neurons here, I'm just going to redraw them below here. Let's move down here. They were in blue and red, weren't they? So we'll grab a blue. So here is one coming, here's the 2 sensory ones coming out, and I think from memory the motor was in pink, so we'll draw the 2 motor ones in pink coming here. And immediately as they exit from the intervertebral foramen, we then get some branching. And what we get is we get some branching heading towards the dorsal, Whoops, nosy. Try that again. Some branching heading towards the dorsal, while other branches head towards the ventral. And if you think for a tick, the relative size of the body to the dorsal of the spinal cord and the ventral, you'll immediately work out that to the dorsal there is a lot less tissue. If you think of a body, you have a spinal cord here and you have a body that sort of looks like this, with an enormous ventral area that has, maybe lungs or heart and gut, whereas to the dorsal you really only have the back muscles. So if you draw a line across here through the spinal cord, you'd immediately see that there's very little to the dorsal and a lot more to the ventral. And that's in fact what happens here with these branches. The dorsal primary rami, as they're called, dorsal primary rami, are much smaller than the ventral primary rami, and that's purely a function that the ventral has a lot more area to cover and a lot more structures to cover. So these are the primary rami coming off the mixed spinal nerve. Well, I hope that sort of explained to you the basics of spinal cord and how the spinal cord is divided into motor and sensory in line with what we see in the neural tube, and the structure from the structure derived from the neural crest, dorsal root ganglion, on the dorsal side giving the sensory, whereas the ventral motor neurons provide ventral fibres. Thank you.